Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into the deep end of macroeconomics.
Yeah, we're looking at five really foundational books, trying to pull out the core ideas, see how they connect and why they, still resonate.
Exactly. It's for anyone who wants to get up to speed quickly, see different angles, and maybe have a few aha moments without getting bogged down.
We've got Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, Marx's Das Kapital, Keynes' General Theory, Friedman and Schwartz's Monetary History, and Polanyi's Great Transformation. Quite a lineup.
Okay, let's kick off with The Wealth of Nations.
Yeah.
1776. Adam Smith, often called the father of economics.
Right. It's sort of the first big systematic look at a market economy.
And a huge idea in there is the division of labor. The pin factory example, remember?
Oh, yeah, classic. How specialization just sends productivity through the roof. It's still, the logic behind global supply chains today, though he noted agriculture is a bit different.
Then there's the invisible hand.
Yeah.
This idea that, well, people chasing their own gain actually end up benefiting society.
Kind of counterintuitive, but the logic is that voluntary trade only happens if both sides benefit, right? So wealth increases, and competition keeps things in check.
And he really went after mercantilism, the old idea that a country's wealth is just its pile of gold.
Yeah, he argued wealth is what you produce and trade. It's about value creation, basically the ancestor of GDP. Think Scotland trading wool for French wine tariffs just get in the way.
So limited government then.
Pretty much. National defense, justice, maybe some public works the market wouldn't provide. He had that great quote about governments being good at draining money from the pockets of the people.
So Smith lays this foundation for free markets, trade, manufacturing, really set the stage.
Absolutely. But then nearly a century later, 1867, you get Karl Marx's Das Kapital, a very different take.
Definitely a critical lens on capitalism. It's actually one of the most cited social science books ever, before 1950 anyway.
Marx saw capitalism boosting production, like Smith, but worried about the workers. He took the labor theory of value further.
Explain that bit, the labor power thing.
Okay, so he distinguished between just labor and a worker's capacity to work, their labor power. He argued capitalists buy labor power, but workers create more value than they're paid for. That difference, that's surplus value.
And that surplus value is where the idea of exploitation comes in. Capitalists own the factories, the tool.
The means of production, yeah. And they get the profits, the surplus value, while workers get wages that are less than the value they actually create.
He also saw this drive to accumulate capital, automate.
Right. Capitalists compete, invest more in machines than people. Marx predicted this would lead to a falling rate of profit and eventually economic crises. And he saw capitalism as just one stage, leading towards communism eventually.
Whether you buy the end prediction or not, his work forced people to grapple with inequality and instability within capitalism. Still relevant debates today.
Definitely highlights potential conflicts baked into the system. Okay, moving into the 20th century, the Great Depression hits.
And that sets the stage for John Maynard Keynes. His general theory in 1936 was a direct response to massive unemployment, like 20% in Britain post-WWI.
He fundamentally challenged the classical view that markets always self-correct to full employment.
His focus was aggregate demand, total spending in the economy. If people and firms aren't spending enough,
You get stuck with prolonged unemployment. He really took issue with size law, the idea that supply creates its own demand.
here's the solution.
Government intervention. Use fiscal policy spending money, even if it means running a deficit, on things like infrastructure projects to create jobs and boost demand. Counter-cyclical policy, basically.
And a multiplier effect, right? Initial spending ripples outwards.
Exactly. Plus, his idea of liquidity preference, why people might just hoard cash instead of investing, especially when uncertain, interest rates play a big role there.
Keynes became hugely influential. Post-war economic policy, dominated by his ideas for decades.
Absolutely reshaped macro theory and government action. But then came a challenge. 1963, Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz publish a monetary history of the United States.
A very different perspective. They put money, well, front and center.
Their big contribution was showing, with tons of historical data, just how much the money supply affects the economy.
And their take on the Great Depression was controversial at the time.
Hugely. They argued the Fed made it worse by letting the money supply shrink dramatically, bank failures, people pulling cash out. They didn't provide the needed liquidity.
This fueled the rise of monetarism.
Right. The idea that steady, predictable control of the money supply is key to stability. Friedman famously advocated for a simple rule: grow the money supply by, say, 3–5% a year.
And it had a real impact. Central banks worldwide started watching monetary aggregates much more closely. Ben Bernanke even acknowledged their point about the Fed's role years later.
Yeah, a landmark book. Okay, one more, Karl Polanyi's The Great Transformation, 1944. This one steps back a bit, looks at the bigger social picture.
He studied the massive social changes that happened when the market economy really took hold in England.
His core idea is embeddedness. The economy isn't separate from society. It's always shaped by social rules, relationships, politics. He argued all markets are planned, in a sense.
So the idea of a pure, self-regulating free market is a myth.
Pretty much. He famously said laissez-faire was planned. The state actively created the conditions for market society. It wasn't just some natural evolution.
And he talked about fictitious commodities. What did he mean by that?
Treating things like labor, land, or even money purely as goods to be bought and sold, ignoring their human or environmental aspects. He argued this leads to social disruption and environmental damage.
There's also the double movement.
Yeah, this idea that as the market tries to detach itself from social constraints, society inevitably pushes back with protective measures, labor laws, environmental regulations, that kind of thing. It's a constant tension.
Polanyi offers a really important critique, challenging some core economic assumptions. Very influential in fields outside pure economics, too, like sociology and political economy.
Definitely relevant for thinking about globalization, financial crises, the social impact of economic change.
So wrapping up, we've seen 5 very different ways of looking at the economy. From Smith's invisible hand to Marx's critique, Keynes's demand management, Friedman's focus on money, and Polanyi's social embeddedness.
Each profoundly shaped how we think about macroeconomics, which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, think about this. What underlying assumptions about, well, human nature and how society works seem to drive each of these different theories?
And how might those deep-down assumptions shape the actual economic policies we see debated and implemented in the world around us today? Something to chew on.